This year, as far as it goes in the state, about 22% of the variety is CL151. About 17% or 18% is CLXL745. Then we have Wells at 17%, Jupiter at 12%, Chenier is at 7%, and Francis is at 6% of the acreage this year. And then we have a whole lot of other varieties after that. So those make up about 82% of the acreage, and the other 18% is made up of a lot of different varieties. I think the next one down would be the CLXL729. There are a lot of Clearfield hybrids out there this year. There's a lot of Clearfield conventionals, and they make up about, together they make up about 50% of the acreage this year, a little better. So those are what our varieties are. I'm not going to go too much into the varieties that we already have, but we do have a few experimentals that we're looking at. One of them that I'm looking at is the by Francis. It ends in the 1161. It yielded very well in both the Arkansas Performance Trials and the Uniform Rice Regional Nursery, which is growing here, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Missouri. And then also it looks real well as far as yield went last year, and it milled well. So that's one we're looking at as a potential variety release for the future. It's a little bit earlier than the Roy J, which we released just recently. That may be one of the things that people are a little concerned about with that variety, but Roy J has very good yield potential, seems to do okay on the disease package, mills well, and it has very good standability. Even though it's tall, it has very good lodging score. It does not lodge very easily. We had rice standing that was left in the field last year because we didn't cut it, and just before Thanksgiving it was still standing. It went through all the weather. Next to that is Taggart. Taggart is one we released the year before. A lot of people have been interested in the Taggart variety, but it hasn't taken off quite as much because it is a couple days later than the Wells variety, but only a couple days. It has very good yield potential. It mills well. It has a large kernel which works well for parboil, and I'm sure Rick will say something about the disease, but it seems to have, even though it's not resistant to blast, it seems to have a pretty good tolerance to the blast variety, or blast races. And then down there we have another experimental that we're looking at, which is next to the 1142 AR, which is a Clearfield variety we have released. And there's an experimental beside it, which is another high-yielding Clearfield variety that we're looking at. But the 1142 will be available next year through Horizon Ag, and it has a higher yield potential than the other conventional Clearfield rices. It looks like it's going to be really a good variety. It's looked well around the state this year, has the high yield potential, but it's got a very large kernel, and it's one of those kind of like the old Lebanon variety. If you've got it, you're going to have to get it out of the field when it's ready. It's been milling like wells in all the tests, and I've noticed that in some cases if you have wells and if the weather conditions aren't good or something, it won't mill well. Well, this is just like it. But it's going to have basically the same requirements that Wells does as far as fertility. It's going to have a similar management package to Wells. And Wells is down there on the end, and when you go by, I don't know if you noticed it, but the 1142 looks an awful lot like the Wells variety. We also have CL181AR, which will be out next year. It's our first semi-dwarf Clearfield released in Arkansas, and it's a little bit, it yields really well. It has in the test. It has a better milling yield. It has a kernel size very similar to CL161, 171 kernel size, and it's looked good too. Rick's going to talk a little bit about the disease package on these.
See, I'm going to focus a little bit on medium grains and also semi-dwarf long grains. The number one medium grain variety grown in Arkansas this year is Jupiter, which was an LSU release. It has some, it's doing well, it has good high yields, it has some disease issues that Dr. Cartwright will bring up, I'm sure. An example of some medium grains that we are high up in the pipeline, we like to call it, close to release here at Arkansas, 2 years maybe, is this RU 1067. And what distinguishes it mostly from the typical southern medium grains is that it has interesting new parents that are coming in, which will hopefully diversify a little bit of the medium grain germplasm, and which add disease resistance. So 1067 actually in our test has been resistant to blast, which is very unusual for medium grains that are also that we've had so far. As far as yield potential is, it yields quite well up with Bengal and Jupiter, and milling yields. We've also been able to maintain the excellent milling yields of typical medium grains. Of course, medium grain market is fickle, and we have actually no idea whether or not it will pass in the ultimate tests until we get a lot of rice in the field. So this is just an example because we have a grouping of about 5 or 6 lines which we will be testing for the medium grain market. Ms. Alicia Stivers has joined our group this year to focus more on the medium grain issues, along with she's doing a lot of phenotyping, which means evaluating our germplasm and evaluating our lines for characteristics such as cold tolerance, straight head, and blast disease, which will help to identify genotypes which are more tolerant to diseases, which result in lower costs of production because it will make it so you don't have to put on a lot of inputs. And I think that's very important for us as breeders to be able to add value not only in the quality but also to help lower costs of production for the farmers. In that vein, there's a line called 1124, which is a very early variety. It's a line, we released it as a germplasm this year, but our interest in earliness is mainly to help conserve water, because we've shown that if you plant early and if you have earlier maturing varieties, you will tend to use less water. And water, of course, is one of our natural resources that we should be concerned about conserving. And as breeders, we can also help to in that conservation efforts. I'm just going to just show one other variety that I guess you all have passed already. A line, not a variety. It's 1030. It's the short one between those two. Well, next to the one called Jess down there. It's a semi-dwarf long grain that has excellent blast disease resistance, and it's in the pipeline to be released shortly.